get to a topic that I had mentioned at the beginning. This is, some people would call it ecumenism, and that's another word for it. That's fine. But there is in the church an understanding of some people don't see a real problem with what we call interfaith dialogue. And I think I might have mentioned this a little bit earlier. I don't remember if I did at the intro. But what we're going to be talking about here is I want to have it really broad at the beginning and then narrow it a little bit. I was looking at something online. I just thought it was kind of interesting, and it's called Interfaith America. And it's one of, I mean, there's the principle and the philosophy behind it is pretty universal. It's been there for a very, very long time. But when I was in California, and as the pastor, I would always get these invitations to these interfaith dialogues put on by the city. And so the mayor would do it. They would host a, quote, prayer breakfast and interfaith dialogue. Now, around our community there in Cypress, again, we're talking about Orange County, California. So you can go in any direction for 50 miles and you don't find any open space. So it's like we're talking about a large population from all the surrounding area if there's churches around. So you could pretty much find churches with every kind of belief system that there possibly could be, from all the normal Protestant ones you would expect. There was the Catholic Church, but you'd have all the others. You'd have the Buddhists and the Hindus, the New Agers, the Muslims, all of them are there. And the invitation would go out to anybody that was a, quote, place of faith, church, you name it, it went out. Synagogues, Jewish people, same thing. Everybody's invited. Now, I obviously never went to any of them. It's just not my kind of thing. I'm not very much for the ecumenical kinds of things, but they felt that there was this idea of dialogue that could be had. And if you were to go look at the website for the Interfaith America, you'll find words like cooperation, pluralism, common good. You'll find all of that kind of stuff. Now, that is the idea that we should be able to get along and find common ground. So the idea of it is noble. I mean, it sounds good, and the idea of having peace with your fellow man, I have no problems with that whatsoever. I think that's a wonderful thing. I'd love to see a peaceful world. It's not man's nature, but it would be a great thing. So in principle, it sounds wonderful, but I can do that without having to sit down. I don't have, I'm not at a place of animosity and anger, and I'm not at war with anybody outside of my beliefs in Christianity. I'm not in that place. I don't want to do violence against them. So you don't need to get me on board with the idea of living peaceably. But I don't need to know anything more than what I already do about what it is that they believe. So if you're going to have me sit down at a table and I want to try to find how can I come to some kind of spiritual common ground with, again, how big is the table? But let's just say all of the major world religions are represented, the big ones. So I'm sitting at a table with a Hindu and with a Buddhist, with a Muslim, with a Jewish person, with all the other denominations within Christianity, whatever else you can throw in there, Satanists, I don't know, whatever you got at the table. I have nothing in common with them. Now, the Christians I might, and with the Jewish person, I could say, the God of the Old Testament is the same God that's in the New. We just very much disagree on the Messiah, but I can have that dialogue separately with them. We are at least on common ground as far as our understanding about God, who He is, as far as the Old Testament is concerned. Same God, old and new, just that the question becomes one of Messiah. So I can have that dialogue with them. But when it comes to the other ones, we're not even talking about the same God. So that means at that point, we're not even having a spiritual discussion. We're only talking about things in the community and, things of peace and how do we make a better life for the people that are here. Okay, great. It's very temporal. But if I'm not able to talk about what makes me who I am, I have nothing to offer them. So clearly they have nothing to offer the believer. There's nothing in their belief system that is of any eternal value to me. And eternity is really ultimately the focus. So when we hear the word, the good news, and the preaching of the gospel, it's where we get the word evangelism. So the Greek is euangelion. It's the good news. And the evangelizo would be the preaching of the good news. So they are just as evangelical in some cases as we, the Christians, are. So we use the term evangelism, or we want to evangelize. That means that we want to bring the good news. The Muslims would believe that they're doing the same thing. They wouldn't use the term evangelical, but they still have the same thing. We believe that you need to believe in Allah, and so he sent us out to tell you what you need to believe. It's not a peaceful evangelism, but it is evangelism nonetheless. They think that it's the good news. It's what needs to be told because people need to be made right before God. So for the people who believe in a personal God, they're all going to have their kind of evangelical way of going out and doing it. So I want to make sure that we understand that people are sent out because of what it is that they believe. Now, if I was to go to one of those interfaith things, my only reason to go there is to see if God would open a door for me to speak to anybody and let them know why I believe it's important that they understand the God of Scripture and what he represents to them and their responsibility before him. You're not going to get that from the other belief systems. So they're more interested in the here and now, where we are as Christians, yeah, the here and now is important, but we're really looking towards the eternal. So now let's narrow it a little bit more, because it becomes this question about within the church. Let's set the unbelieving world outside, and now let's deal with the people who call themselves Christians. What is our interaction with those people? Okay. If we are talking about a particular variety of Christianity that believes in the major elements of Christianity, and they don't all, by the way. There are people who will call themselves Christians who don't believe in the deity of Jesus Christ, that don't believe in the physical bodily resurrection of Jesus after death. They don't believe in his virgin birth. There are a number of different things. They're like, okay, you can call yourself a Christian all day long. You're not a Christian. So I'm sorry if that offends somebody, but that's just the way that it is. These are things that are non-negotiables. So call yourself whatever you want to, but there are some things that really are a dividing line within Christianity. Now, there are also doctrines that some people say, well, we shouldn't divide on doctrines, and you sometimes will hear people say that, those are not salvation issues, so we shouldn't divide over those things. Well, okay, people want to go ahead and say that, and I can probably give some examples of where, yeah, well, they are heaven and hell kinds of things if you believe the wrong parts of it. So I mentioned it yesterday on a live broadcast that I did with my friend Kyle. People can go ahead and say, well, I believe in infant baptism. Okay, it's not a salvation issue, but depending on what school of theology you come from that led you to that point, you may very well find out that when you start to examine the rest of what they believe, that you're really not sitting across the table from someone who is a believer at that point. But they're wrong on that part. But boy, when you get into the big stuff, they're really wrong on that. And what do I want to do anything ministry-wise with them? Why do I want to embrace that? Why do I want to try to find common ground? So can we agree that, life is important and that we should support the idea of life as far as abortion is concerned? Absolutely, that's great. How about whether it comes to matters of gender or of marriage? Do they have a traditional view of all of those things? Great. If they do, that's fine. Doesn't mean that I need to be involved with them. If they're doing their outreach and whatnot in that part of town, I'll do mine in this part of town. I don't have to, make it a verbal agreement or disagreement. You do what you do, I'll do what I do, and I don't need to build bridges. I don't need to burn them. I'm going to do what God has asked me to do. And there are a number of people who are of like mind with me on a variety of things. And, I agree with them on almost everything, and I don't have enough time to hang out with them and do things with them in ministry. So this is why one of those things, I think it's very, very important for a pastor or somebody who's in a place of real influence over and with people by the things that they say, that they really ought to be pretty detectable. Where do they stand on various things? So this became a big, big topic over the last 15 to 20 years and still is to this day when it comes to things like music and the music that gets put out there and what's being sung in churches. I had a very kind of narrow, if you will, view of what we should be singing. And if it was put out by people who had some really weird theology. And yeah, it was things like Bethel, it was elevation, it was Hillsong, and the rest of those, especially the later Hillsong stuff. There was stuff that was put out 30 years ago before we knew anything really about where they were theologically. And you could look at the words on the page, and they look solid. There's nothing I could find wrong with some of the lyrics that they had. But when they started to stake out what it was that they believed, theologically and doctrinally, that's like, I don't want to have any association whatsoever to do with them, even to the point of singing a song that I don't find any real problem with. And why is that? Well, because if that stuff's being sung in the church, then I have at that point made it fair game. Go ahead and look up everything of Hillsong. Go ahead and look at their church. Go ahead and look at their doctrine. Look at all the rest of that stuff. And it's a slippery slope that I didn't want to go down. Now, that same thing with Bethel. It's even worse with them because they're into some really, really weird stuff. So it's worse than just the prosperity gospel of Hillsong. It got into some occultic stuff still to this day that Bethel is involved with, and it just gets worse by the day. So I didn't want any Bethel stuff. And it was starting to find its way even into their music, where you would read the lyrics and go, this is not accurate. It's not biblical. It's unbiblical, actually. It's not even neutral. So again, this idea of how do we interact with people and with ministries and whatnot. I'm not looking to go out and pick fights, but if it comes to me, and if I'm supposed to be involved with something, I want to make sure that whoever I'm involved with, I am of like mind. I'm not like mind with Bethel. I'm not like mind with the New Apostolic Reformation. I'm not in like mind with Calvinism. I'm not like-minded with any of those things. So if I was still pastoring a church somewhere, and there was some kind of an interfaith thing that they wanted to do with the churches that are around, you're not going to find me hanging out there with those people. If it's doing some kind of big outreach kind of a thing, well, what do I have to do to be a part of it? If I'm having to share a stage with somebody that doesn't even believe in how people get saved the same way that I do, and if they believe that the only people that would ever come to believe in Jesus is because he made them believe in him, I don't have a lot of common ground with those people on a variety of things. So rather than fight and argue about the whole thing, how about I just refuse it altogether and not even take part in it? So people might look at that and say, well, that's incredibly narrow-minded. Agreed. I have no problems. I will own that all day long. So if people want to go ahead and point to me, and I've said this a number of times, people want to look at me and say, you're so narrow-minded, I will tell them you don't know the half of it. I am as black and white gets. There's not a lot of gray with me. And again, doesn't say that I'm right, doesn't say that I'm wrong, but that's just, as I read the text, I'm not looking to try to find common ground with people with whom I disagree so much on so many things. If people are getting saved through their ministries and it's genuine faith, praise the Lord, I'm glad about that. I'm not going to change the trajectory one way or the other by being involved with them. I just have to be faithful to what God has asked me to do. And I say all of this to us. How is it that anybody who's hearing what I'm saying, how is it that we are supposed to engage in this world? We have a finite amount of hours in each day. We have a finite amount of minutes that we can dedicate to one thing or another. Do we want to spend our time, or even spend inordinate amounts of time, on things that just don't matter in the overall scheme of things? And that goes down to our affiliations, the people with whom we do things, and how we interact when it comes to matters of faith. So kind of a big challenge. I've become probably more entrenched in my position over years, and unapologetically so. And again, people want to call me narrow-minded, that's fine. I'll own that title all day long. And it's just kind of, it comes with the territory of growing older in the Lord and realizing that when it came to the things that Jesus taught, it wasn't like there was ever a time, or even Paul, it's like, well, you know, they may get this, that, and the other thing wrong, but they're pretty nice on a bunch of other stuff. I just didn't catch that with him. It's like there's a right way and there's a wrong way, and he was always offering correction, which means that there's not a lot of room for other beliefs and other views of things within the church. So we're best to make sure that whatever it is that we believe is best informed by the whole of Scripture. and then be careful of our affiliations thereafter. So any questions you have on any of that, I would love to hear from you, and always enjoy the dialogue of at least explaining my point. If we cannot come to any kind of conclusion and resolution, that's fine. We can part ways at that point. And again, if we're still both believers, we'll see one another in heaven. I just don't need to be involved in what you're doing. You don't have to be involved in what I'm doing. That's fine. Each of us will stand before God someday for what he has given to us and what we've done with it. So again, questions, contact me through the ministry's website, oldpaththeology.net, and I'd love to hear from you.